Let's just go.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Okay, so let's just go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, my formal training is as a graphic designer, journalist, communication graphics, this kind of stuff, old school, way back when you used to use pencil and paper and typewriters and all this sort of nonsense. And I got into formal journalism out in the Middle East.
Oh,
Okay, so out in the Middle East, I was the art director or creative director for a company called Motivate Publishing. We in Dubai, and we used to do, um, I guess it's retail consumer publications, such as What's on Emirates Woman, Emirates in Flight, and so on like that.
cool. Okay.
Uh, as a creative director or art director at that time, my responsibility was a studio full of people and also to take the camera because part of my degree was to have photography as part of my qualification. So then journalism came along because the editor of the publication at that time was a bit busy and we had to do an interview with a company who'd come in. They were promoting, funny enough, South Africa and Rovers Rail, actually. So the Blue Train is what they were actually promoting. So the guy who was the sort of the CEO at the time came to South Africa, and I was sent by the editor to go and take photos of him whilst he was doing the presentation and so like this. And on the way out from the door, the editor said, "Well, you might as well just take a recording of the video of it, and then we'll sort out how we write the story afterwards." So, uh, old-fashioned dictaphone used to have a little bit of a tape in there, and no digital anything. So, of course, we did the interview and so on like this with the guy, took the photos, got back to the studio, and the editor turns around and says, "Well, you were there, you might as well write it." Fine, thank you very much. I'll write it. And of course, I wrote it, and it was edited several times and until we got to some kind of cohesive story about it. And obviously, I did pretty well. So I started doing bits of journalism and so on like this. So that's how that sort of went into it. Eventually, I was left Motivate Publishing, started my own company in Dubai called MPDPS, or it was a it was actually a graphic design stroke advertising agency stroke more corporate design work and so on like this. And that meant having to talk to various people and get the background of the people's companies and then write up the corporate copy for that. So obviously you start learning a different way, which is a business style of writing. And you also get to learn to ask questions of what's happening. And this sort of question and answers and like this will be in context of what you say when how do what happened and how do you get into the property industry.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so long story short, spent about 30 odd years in the Middle East doing various publications from Dubai to Qatar to the UAE, Qatar, Saudi, Kuwait, all the Middle East regions, including Egypt. So time came to leave the Middle East, and a friend of mine, her daughter was working at a company called Media Nova in Cape Town.
Uh-huh.
So we had a conversation, and she put me in touch with the owner and MD of that company. And long story short, again, I came to South Africa. I had a quick interview with the guy, and a couple of months later, I was offered the job as business development director.
Amazing.
So that was fine. The magazine was called Property Magazine, which he used to run. So in those days, it was almost an A3 size printed publication.
Oh my
It
goodness.
had a big red banner at the top and basically said property. That publication went out regionally and sort of, what do you mean regionally? So there was a Cape Town, Western Cape version, there was a Gauteng version, and there was a KZN version. Okay, so then that started. Obviously, that my job was then to business develop and get advertising and develop other products, which was there. So um, yes, we did Auction Alliance was a company which was there, which did auctions, and we did their publication for them. Got that going. Um, you will have heard of SAPOA, the South African Property Owners Association. So we pitched for it as Media Nova to get the contract to do the monthly publication and their quarterly publication. So we were successful, of course, and for a while we produced that at Media Nova. Time came, business development is great, except when you suddenly start realizing you're working very hard for somebody else and your reward is not as good as it should be. So I left Media Nova and started MPDPS, Pettipher Design and Photographic Services. Basically to follow that same kind of industry. So other people needed other publications and so on like this. The design element was there and so on like this. So MPDPS came along. I started off as a one person in Gordons Bay, doing bits of photography, bits of writing, bits of whatever was there. And then eventually I got a phone call, or I had heard that Media Nova no longer had the contract with SAPOA. So I keep mentioning SAPOA because without SAPOA, I wouldn't be in the position I am now.
Amazing. Okay.
So here's the story. SAPOA needed to still get their publication out, Property Review, and Property Developer was the other publication I had, which was the quarterly. I then approached them and said, listen, I understand that you need somebody to still do this. How can I help you? So they said, okay, well, they put it out to tender and so on like this. And then I came in and I did the pitch and I won the contract as a one-man band.
Wow.
Although, obviously I played it up a little bit because what I did was I recruited into the team the previous editor, the sales director.
Oh my goodness.
And then I became, obviously because we were doing the design work, that was fine. I had myself plus one other person who was working with me as the design. So basically I set up my publishing company on the back of the single publication Property Review.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And so for 7 years, we went through a whole lot of iterations of it, of course. And eventually, about 3 years into the contract, my then editor decided that she didn't want to play the game anymore and wanted to do her own thing. So I said, okay, no problem. I'll just take over the editor of it and became the editor and publisher of it. So this is where it gets really quite interesting because SAPOA being a member-driven organization, the majority of their members are the REITs guys. So you're talking about Growth Point, Redefine, Depula, these kind of guys. These are big guys who Growth Point obviously is big into shopping centers and office. Similarly, Polo more into retail and so on like this. So now, obviously, what happens is that when you start talking to people, you get to understand what the industry is and who's who in the industry. So to put this into context, if I was a younger person and I was looking for a career, I would then go into something like property. Now, property is more than just real estate. Most people think it's go and buy a house and you've got an estate agent and so on like that. That's merely one sector of it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of governance that goes with that. You've got the PPRA, Property Practitioners Real something Authority, Regulatory Authority, and that everyone who is in the real estate business has to be a registered person with the PPRA. Okay, so then that requires you to almost have NQFs as part of your formal training to be able to get in there. And you have to be sponsored through a registered estate agency. And then you've got principals and you've got so on like this. So again, this takes you back into how do you know about this sort of stuff? And what would be great is if people would actually educate people at school level, because there's career days which happen at school, and people like the Property Sector Charter Council, for example, Portia Tasakati, who's the CEO there. In the days before Zoom and all this sort of stuff, she would literally do a road show around various high schools and talk to kids on career days. So I think if you're talking to schools, then you should say to them, listen, you need to get hold of various people like the Property Sector Charter Council, who would then explain what is the property sector. So just to sort of make this different, I mean, there are many different sectors, elements to the property sector. So you could even look at something like facilities management, for example.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So facilities management means every building that the public goes into, the shopping center, will have a manager who looks after the whole shopping center.
Yeah.
That person is probably called a facilities manager. And then what does that mean? That means he looks after making sure that the doors open, the toilets are working, the air conditioning is going okay, the lights are on and the light bulbs are actually in place. Yeah. So this is the kind of extended version of a particular area within property management.
Yeah.
If you then look at the property sector in all, you've got residential, you've got commercial property, which then is industrial, obviously your buildings, warehousing, and so on like this. You've got what they call mixed use, which is properties that include residential, shopping, and other precincts which can work into that. Then you've got, what did I say? Mixed use, industrial, residential.
Retail as well. Yeah.
Retail, yes, as in shops and so on like this. And then facilities and schooling and so on like that. Okay, so if you start talking about various things that happen within the industry, learning about the industry can come through mentorship and sponsorship. So people like Redefine, for example, they have the Redefine mentorship program.
Okay.
This is and Vukile Properties has a mentorship program whereby they will take a dozen or so students, people who have already gone through the courses and so on like this, have finished with UCT or WITS University or whatever it is, and then they will take them as either interns or give them specific tasks to do. And Iris does the same. So as a sort of lookout, if you look at the major REITs companies, major property companies, you will find most of them will have something which allows students to further their education through them. And in some cases, they get absorbed into the companies themselves, depending on how good they are.
Mark, I've heard you mention and refer to REITs a couple of times, and I've seen the acronym quite a bit. Would you mind just breaking it down? What exactly is it? Is it listed property companies? How exactly would you define? the risk.
That's real estate investment trusts.
Investment trust. Okay, got it.
Okay. So what that then means is that those companies are listed on the Joburg Stock Exchange, and then they are governed by a set of rules of, well, it's shared ownership of that, and it's investment. So you'll have several investors going into various funding models and so on like this. And then there are dividends that are paid out from those investment trusts. So if you look at Redefine and Growthpoint, these are the two largest REITs in South Africa. Then you get a very close follow through with people like Dipula, sorry, and then Vakili, Iris is in there. Yeah, there must be about 27, I stand corrected, but there's about 27 major REITs within South Africa.
Okay.
Now, there are also several non-REITs players, who are not listed, but they also do the same function as the REITs. So there are investment opportunities which are not governed by the Joburg Stock Exchange.
And they're just as large.
So,
Is that what you're saying? They're not listed, but they're just as big as being key players in the industry.
yeah. You might find that there's sort of maybe 3 or 4 directors within some of those non-listed companies. And then, of course, they've got their own private shareholders and so on like that. Okay, so if you look at a job or a career path
Yes.
within the property sector, I mean, I would have probably gone into property management.
Okay. And why is that?
Because it's because you've got a team of people that you work with, and that would be making sure that the facilities are working, the investments are working, and so on like that. So yeah, and that's where somebody like Growthpoint comes in, because they take across all sectors. So if you're looking at industrial, Growthpoint has industrial parks. They have office facilities, office parks. They have retail facilities. So the bigger ones, you get this diverse sector of activities that's going on. And then, of course, you've got the development side of property as well. So you've got construction and all like this. And you can talk to people like Enza, for example. Enza Construction, one of the biggest construction companies. And you've got people like WBHO, which is also a development company. If you look at people like Abcon and Abland, these are two similar companies, but separate. And they also build. So when you're driving down Winnie Mandela Drive, and you're just about to get to Sandton, on the right-hand side, there's what's it called, something called City. They're busy building this huge block of mixed use going up there. But what that means, so that means what they're looking for is they're looking for residential, they're looking for office, and they're looking for shopping within a precinct.
Oh, okay.
So and this,
yeah.
So this is what they would call live, work, play.
Sure,
So
yeah.
you live close to it, you work close to it, and you play close to it. So within that precinct would be the shopping, the gymnasium, the swimming pool, whatever it is. So you don't have to go anywhere or far from your sort of home environment.
Are you finding that that's quite a big trend? And is it mainly in the residential context, or is retail also really actively moving to build that little community within? Yeah, is that the trend right now?
I would think, given Okay, let's put it in a South African context. Security is a huge um, deciding factor on how people live, work, and play.
Right.
So um, if you look at Cape Town, for example, close to the CBD, you will have various buildings going up there which have that full factor into it, the full gamut of what's going on. The trend there is obviously people want to be close. They don't want the expense of driving. They don't want you, they want the security of whatever it is they need. So if you take even Rosebank, for example, there by the Gautrain, you've got the Rosebank Mall, you've got the Rosebank shopping centers, you've got hotels, you've got everything like this. And then that's close to something like Sandton, like the Sandton node, which also has live, work, and play, but it's more business orientated and has conference facilities and so on like this. So you will find that there is a trend a little bit in South Africa that there is a move towards transportation zones and how people can actually get in and out of
Yeah.
the areas that you're talking about. So even in Joburg, they're talking about extending the Gautrain out even further to places like Lanseria, which is an airport, of course, and there's a development going out in Lanseria so that they can start to have the urbanization happening in that farming, slightly more rural area, and so on like this. So there is, as a property sector, there's a lot of activity that's going on, and even in this economic climate, there is development and there is growth. So this is very promising because that means that for younger generations that there are opportunities for work and so on like that. And the last figure I heard about the property sector is that it's worth about 7.5 trillion rand. So you
Oh,
count those numbers, and that's how much it is. And that includes everything from residential flats through to the big boys playing in the sort of REIT sector. So that figure was given to me by Portia Tausakate, who at the Property Sector Charter Council, they do the research and they have modules and so on like this, which actually gives them that. And they're a semi-government, quasi-government. In fact, they report to the Department of Works
oh,
and Industry, DPWI, I think it is, whatever. Anyway, yeah, so Portia reports to the minister basically at the end
okay.
of the day.
Okay.
But her membership are all the associations that are in the property sector. So the SAPOAs, so the SA, well, the Valuers, Institute of Valuers, and so on like this. They're all part of it. And if you remember at the conference, they said that one fellow was talking, the CBE was talking about all the guys that actually work within that industry. And
Yes.
yeah.
And lastly, how important would you say, okay, the formal education, we did touch on the NQF levels and all the different uh, courses that are also available for people to go into. But what about like, because I know what you read about and what you learn about in class and at school, it can be quite close to reality, but it can also be a little bit out of touch at times, I have found. How important would it be to also really immerse oneself in, oh, sorry, let me just get this off, in like just regular reading of the property industry? You've mentioned quite a few publications as well, and they're quite accessible from what I hear you saying. How important would that be to build a career in the industry as well?
Okay, reading something like Asset Magazine would be a good one to read because Tony Corsten is the publisher and owner of that. He seems to cover most of the property sector. So that would be my main lead one. You can go to the Property Wheel website. That will give you current news. You can go to my website, the Ruder Media, publishermedia.co.za. That also gives you current news. and within that gives you tools like the various reports that
Yeah.
companies need uh, to be able to do valuations and financial trends and so on like that. It is important to keep up to date with it if you're in the property sector because you are bound to find everybody, and you should try to become a member of something like SAPOA um, to be able to sort of access. And I know SAPOA does also do bursaries as well. So, that there's a good way to get in there. And I can see you've got 8 minutes left here. Um,
Also reporting to you.
the yeah, so look, I think the sort of minimum requirement to get into universities and so on is an NQF8. I stand to be corrected. There are about 8 universities in South Africa that deal with property or built environment courses, of which UCT, WITS, UJ, University of Pretoria, and I think KZN has now started one as well. So 5 that I can think of off the top of my head, which are there. CPUT, yes, is there, and also the Western Cape, University of the Western Cape also does courses. So so I've just told you 7 of the 8 that I can think of off the top of my head. um, uh, yeah, I think it's important to read out to just have general knowledge about what's going on. But you can even get into property through things like Otis and Schindler lift companies because they do
Right.
transportation with buildings and so on like this. And an extension from there could be facilities management
Oh,
because obviously a lift has to be put in, it has to be maintained and so on like this. So, there's different ways of getting into the sector. So
okay.
you could even come in through an electronics qualification through a TVET college.
That's actually very interesting, and I'm glad that you brought that up. That's definitely something that I feel like, especially if you're already immersing yourself in what's happening, there are just so many avenues and so many ways that you can find yourself inside this very vast industry, and actually be able to do something on a day-to-day basis, that is
Sure.
reachable to most people.
See,
Okay.
a lot of companies like Enza, for example, that build a shopping center or a hospital or whatever. When they're starting to break ground, they will also engage with the local community. And that's important because a lot of the labor that is required in building these complexes has to come from people locally.
Interesting. Okay.
And that means the economic impact of a shopping center being built or a hospital or whatever can then dissipate into the local community. And in some cases, those local contractors may get a full-time contract with that particular facility that's being built.
Sure.
So, there's different ways of finding out and going on. If you're a young person, maybe you go and knock on the door of the construction manager and say, listen, how do I get into this?
Sure.
But you have to be strong enough to be able to go, and don't be afraid to go and ask the questions.
Yes. Yes. Put yourself out there. Yeah, that's very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Before it cuts us off, I'm just gonna wrap us up. I think it's about 4 minutes that we have left. So, yeah, I'm just gonna say thank you so much, Mark. I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share your valuable knowledge and guidance with us. Hopefully we can do it
You're
again
welcome.
if you don't mind. I would really, really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, okay. I'd really, really love that. So what
If
I'm
you've got specific questions,
Mhm.
if you've got specific questions, just let me know. And then we can talk on particular topics. It's easy because obviously we've just given you a broad church.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'll also do is when we end the live video on Facebook. I've just got it here on the side. I'll just put on your Rhoda, oh, it's gonna kill me, rhodamedia.co.za links. And then
Yes.
so people can at least start reading up and getting some information and understanding also what it is that you do. And some of the other links that we spoke about as well, I'll also just post them up on there. And yeah, when we have more specific topics, I would really love to sit with you again and go through them.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome.
The next time I'll get a jacket and a tie, you know.
That'll be great too. The knowledge
I'll
that
put, I'll, I'll put the, I'll put the hard hat on.
the hard hat, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. And I hope you have a
You're welcome.
long weekend with the family. Stay safe, and we'll catch up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you too. Most welcome, Nina, and let's speak soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye.